All right, welcome back to No Coast Defenders in our first, I guess it's going to be the first episode of the new kind of direction we're going in. I was going to call it like 2.0, but really kind of 3.0 because when we lost Tim and went to just the two of us was kind of a new thing too. But we are here once again, and if Dan cuts out, we apologize. He can't control the weather. That is not one of his defender's powers, but we're gonna give it a go. So if you watched last week's episode, which really was posted this week as well, because life in my life, I mean, I was exhausted and have been battling a migraine for over a week. So we're gonna move away from just the strictly superhero comics and movies and the television stuff. We're gonna talk just what we're watching. So we're still going to be no Coast Defenders because my sister-in-law Amanda made this great logo for us and I love it. So we'll still be the No Coast Defenders, but now we're defending against bad vibes when watching things. So uh, uh, we'll get to your non-spoilers Batman review, I think, pretty early here. But first, any like television movie news that's caught your eye? Anything you're looking forward to coming up here?
I'm really looking forward to Moon Knight, to be quite honest. I mean, not just as a comic book fan, but I think it's going to be something a lot different that we haven't quite seen from comic book related material. And I'm a huge Oscar Isaac fan, so I'm really looking forward to that component of it all. What he brings to the screen. I love what I've seen from the previews. I know many people have their preconceived notions about the show or what he's going to look like or whatever. I don't care about any of that. I'm just really looking forward to that. And then Multiverse of Madness. I'm looking forward to either really loving it or being really disappointed. I don't think there will be an in between, but those are probably the two things I'm most excited about coming up.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to both those two. And since we're just in our first episode of like switching direction, this has been news for a while, but love that How I Met Your Father already had a second season. I think it was like 3 episodes in when the second season was announced. So
I missed that. Nice.
Yeah, so How I Met Your Father second season. Love that. Love that for Hilary Duff, especially since like her Lizzie McGuire like adult series was canceled. I would have loved to see what that was. Wasn't the biggest Lizzie McGuire fan, but I wanted to see what that was going to be, and the fact that the reason it happened and was canceled was because she wanted to be a more adult direction.
Mm-hmm.
I'm happy she's at least getting this because How I Met Your Father, it's not life-changing. It's not the best series I've ever seen. But I think it fixes a lot of things that How I Met Your Mother kind of got wrong. And it's not as creative with the storytelling. Like How I Met Your Mother loved to change like narrative styles throughout different episodes to play with different things, whereas How I Met Your Father is probably pretty straightforward.
I mean, honestly, I love how one-dimensional it is. It's such a simplistic show that it's one of those things like I put it on while I'm grading and I'm just able to follow along with the show while grading, and nothing major is going to happen. Like How I Met Your Mother, there were shocks. There was like, oh, what's this about? Especially in later seasons. And to be honest, that got tiring for me. Whereas this show, it's like, I mean, even after the last episode, I'm not going to spoil anything for anybody, but that was something I wasn't expecting, but was also expecting. I was like, oh, cool. And so it's a no-brainer watching it. And to be quite honest, we don't have enough of those shows around anymore.
Yeah, I think sometimes people forget that the show doesn't have to be too smart to try to outsmart the audience.
Yeah.
This is a very likable cast, and it's a fun story. So enjoy that. Like, it's great.
And for being on Hulu for a show that was kind of optioned more than anything else after it had been kicked around in so many different ways since How I Met Your Mother ended. There's a lot of chemistry there between the cast. There really is. And the camaraderie among them, it's not overcomplicated dialogue. Nobody has, taglines. They don't have the high fives amongst them. It's a lot less complicated than How I Met Your Mother was. I rewatched How I Met Your Mother last year and I realized that they just did too much. They really did. And this nice, I don't want to say watered down, but pared down version of the show, I enjoy it much more. No, I don't think the acting is on par yet. I don't think the story is quite there, but I'm also enjoying the fact that it's much simpler. It's a fun watch for me.
Yeah, did you watch the very short-lived A to Z with Ben Feldman and Christina Miletti?
Yeah, I don't think they ever let it get the wings to fly. I think that could have been pretty good.
Yeah, this is kind of what I'm getting the vibes of. It's the same thing as just a good like, hey, let's get a charismatic, likable cast and let them tell the story and
Yeah.
try to make it more to real life. So, and that's how the vibes I get. And I think there's a lot of great series that weren't trying to be too smart. I think Trophy Wife, which was cursed by a terrible name on ABC. I
Yeah.
like great cast and just a fun story about I think a third wife trying to like fit into this family and
Mhm. Was
um,
that the one?
all,
Was that Jennifer Godwin in that one?
Malin Ackerman
Oh, okay, gotcha.
and then Bradley Whitmore, um, other people. It's kind of unfortunate. It just really the other another similar one that just terribly named, of course, was Selfie.
Mhm.
And I thought that was this great series that wasn't trying too much. So you're right, we need more sitcoms like this that aren't trying to outthink the audience because sometimes we don't need it. Like I love Only Murders in the Building. I love it. We can have more of those too, but I don't need every series to be like trying to outsmart the premise. Like,
Yep.
and I think we're getting this is something we've talked about a few times. I think we mentioned it last week. We're getting that. I think American Auto is just a really, really funny comedy.
And it's one that I much more enjoy a show that's not afraid to say things on network television and does so with humor. And so, like I'm said, that Blackish is being not canceled, but it's done because there's a lot of stuff that happens in the boardroom on that show that's really timely and also comical. And so I like that American Auto saves that on TV in many ways because you don't see that type of material very often where it's um, not just camaraderie, but it's things that could realistically be said in a workplace.
Yeah,
And
and of course, American Auto is done by Justin Spitzer, who of course did Superstore, show we both loved.
yep.
So it's not really shocking that he was able to assemble a brilliant cast that works really well together, and that he's not afraid to tackle things. I think Superstore was one of the smartest shows on television, but it
Oh,
wasn't
without a doubt.
it wasn't preachy about it. It wasn't trying to show you was smarter than it. It was just like, hey, even if you don't realize it, we're brilliant because you've seen this in your Walmart or your Target. Like,
And that's the thing. He excels at showing the reality of situations and things. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed American Auto too. And I mean, it also really hones in on that failing upwards thing that is pretty much the tale of America at this point, especially in the corporate world. So he tackles that perfectly. I'm a big fan of that. And that's a show. Lauren and I don't have a lot of shows to watch together, but that's one that we actually watch together.
I think one of the most interesting things I've seen about American Auto specifically is as Peacock's trying to scale up. One of the things they're doing is they're slowly removing shows from Peacock or from Hulu, and the two shows I see listed often are Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which I think is now off Hulu and only on Peacock,
Mhm.
and then American Auto. And then like some articles will say like and Keenan and Young Rock and like, but I'm like it's kind of funny that American Auto is that second show like, and Brooklyn Nine-Nine's not on anymore. And of course, like The Office is only Peacock exclusive already, so there are reasons that these two still, but like that's the one news articles are pointing out that won't be on Hulu soon because it is getting views on Hulu right now.
Yeah, I mean, they compared it to The Office right out the gate, and not even by the style, just the nuances of it. And that's where I actually didn't watch it at first because I was skeptical. The second I see something like that, I'm like, is it really though? And so I watched it. I'm like, not even close to the same show by any means, but in terms of relatability and what we're doing here, yeah, I could see this show going somewhere, and I hope it does.
I think yeah, the most relatable, other than the fact that it involves people working together, which is like something that television sitcoms have been doing around for as long as they exist. So that's not the, but the fact that sometimes you're watching and you're like, oh yeah, this I could believe is improvised, but I also like believe as we hear, I think the Office ladies have been a really, really good thing about this. I think Scrubs does a good job about it because they've always praised Scrubs for like the janitor and JD's improvising.
Oh yeah,
But like you listen to Zach and Donald talk about it, and a lot of it was just really well written. And then you learn in the Office like it's such a fraction of what you think might be improvised was improvised. It's just great writing. And I think that's what American Auto has, is this great writing that, yes, you could believe this was improvised because of chemistry, or you can believe that, shit, they just have a talented writing staff.
Yeah, no, without a doubt.
And I think that's important for television. I think improvisation, we went overboard with idolizing it because of the Judd Apatow's films, and not trying to knock Apatow, Rogan, all those guys, because they were great about it. But if you watch the bloopers and outtakes, they had just as many terrible versions of those scenes as they had great ones, because they're just letting them go.
Yeah.
And I love that idea for the creative process, but like when you have to do a tight 22 minutes, sometimes you just have to go with what's on this page.
Well, I mean, they brought in Anna Gasteyer and John Barinholtz, who are both great improv folks. And I don't know if John's ever actually spoken from a script in anything he's ever been in. So I just, when you have those two anchors, you know, for a show, that's just a solid right there.
Well, I feel like this more than any of his other roles, Barinholtz has to have like be working from the script a little bit, because the emotional nuance in some of the performance has been wonderful. Which, check it out for that alone, guys. He's very slapstick, like as you would expect from the guy, but some
in
of
a
that,
different way.
Yeah, but that nuance he's portraying as well is just brilliant. I think a lot of the nuance in the show is kind of just great too, and that I could see compared to The Office. But any great sitcom has that nuance. That's why it can last forever. I think Superstore was like a master of nuance. So
yeah.
All right, but you, unlike me, braved the theater and saw. Is it The Batman? Is that what they're calling this one?
It is The Batman.
The Batman, and you didn't hate it. Which anyone who watches this who knows Dan's DC takes and his Batman takes is shocked right now to hear that. So please give us your non-spoiler review.
So to be quite honest, when I walked out of it, I was shocked that it was from the same studio as all of the rest of the trash that's been released. I did miss, full disclosure, I missed about 15 minutes of it because I got stuck in the elevator when I got to go pee. It is a 3-hour movie, not counting the 24 minutes of previews. So it's a doozy, but they finally got Batman right. You know, so many times we have to delve into the parent stuff and all that crap. We all know Batman's backstory, right? So this movie starts at a very different place in Batman's life. I'm not going to say when. It doesn't spoil anything, but I want you to just take it all in. And it's almost like a psychological thriller in many ways with this movie. And so the interesting thing, Gregory, is everybody I know who loves the Joker, we all know I hated the Joker. Inside it was a great piece on mental health and psychology and all that stuff, are shitting on this movie when this movie actually did it right. And this is coming from a mental health professional. Hi, guys. This movie really tackled it in a very astute and not so in your face way, and I absolutely loved it. The acting was on point. I know I've seen so many people with the memes like emo Batman. He's not. Yes, Robert Pattinson was in Twilight 20 fucking years ago. That's not who this Batman is. This Batman is actually the most on par with who Batman is that we've gotten on the big screen yet. Does it surpass Michael Keaton? No, I don't think anybody will in that role, in my opinion. But the writing was on point. We've both discussed how I hate these longer projects. Yes. You know, I made it past the 2-hour mark and still didn't want to fall asleep. Like I was actually, the second act was a bit slow, but I was still invested because of this web they were weaving, and the performances were great. Zoe Kravitz was the perfect casting for this. And if you're going in expecting to get these characters as you know them, you may be disappointed, but if you open your mind up, you'll see why we are. And what a freaking ride, man. And my main critique, I do wish Robert Pattinson got a haircut for the movie. That's just a certain thing I wish for. But like all the Batman movies, it has to be dark. And I don't mean by dark content, I mean dark visually. And I squinted throughout the entire movie because I think it's raining for 2 hours and 52 minutes of the 2 hours and 54 minutes that the movie runs. And it's shot in a very dark way, which is often done for Batman. It doesn't work for my eyes. I wear transition lenses, so it's even worse while trying to watch these things. But I saw it with a Batman fan. You see Eric and I go back and forth. My good buddy Eric Marshall, huge Batman fan. He wasn't as much of a fan as I was. There were certain things he was looking for that he didn't get as a Batman fan. Now, I grew up a Batman fan, loving like early Detective Comics. Do not like the later stuff. So this movie was based much more on Detective Comics stuff than it was on the later Batman stuff that a lot of folks grew up with in our age group. So I see the disconnect. Performances are great. Writing was incredible on this. I'm looking forward to seeing it a second time because of the time I missed while locked in the elevator, as well as there's certain nuances that I think I missed or didn't pick up on. And I forgot Colin Farrell was in the movie until I read about Colin Farrell being in the movie afterwards. So that's just how great the makeup was in this movie. Um, Man, it's a hell of a watch. It really is. And I think that was a spoiler free as I can do it.
Sounds you skipped over the influences because you wanted to like you didn't think it was going to spoil, but you didn't want people. But I'm going to ask a question about it because if you've seen anything about this movie, Matt Reeves has been talking about the influences for over 2 years now, and it's what Darwin Cook's Ego, Long Halloween, and then the other one is the Year Two story. So it's kind of funny you mentioned like going back to the detective because those are all stories that like heavily involved in detective. Ego a little bit less because it's more about the dual identity stuff. But those are all great stories that are fairly modern, but also rooted in that detective thing. So it's kind of hilarious that we know Batman can still do those detective stories. Just DC Comics puts out so much stuff that is supposed to inspire blockbuster movies that's kind of terrible. I think you and I have talked about this, but I can't stand the Nolan trilogy.
I can't either.
I want this to be a hit because I'm sick of hearing about Heath Ledger being the best Batman villain for his performance in Joker because I thought he was the second best in that movie. Aaron Eckhart was way better.
I liked him. I just hate how they wrote it. I thought that whole trilogy was so sloppily written. It's not even funny. Like the reason why I loved Ledger so much is because you could tell that he actually ad-libbed the whole thing because he wasn't reading from that shitty script. That trilogy was straight trash. And my buddy Nate, who I know will watch this, Nate Bell, I ranked this Batman as my third on the list. And he said it wasn't even better than anything from that trilogy. And I said, tell me what you liked about that trilogy. He said, Christian Bale's my Batman. And I said, why? And there was no reply. He just said, we're done with this conversation. So what I will say, any Batman you've seen before, think about why you liked it, what you liked about it. I'm not knocking your choice, but this is like no Batman we have seen before. This is like, I put it on par as far as grittiness goes with Logan, to be honest, as those movies go. And I mean, Logan is one of the greatest comic book themed movies of all time, in my opinion, and this isn't. But in terms of what they shot for, it's there. And I really hope they go in this direction because I'm seeing him labeled as a brooding Batman. He's not. He's a Batman that's hurting and figuring the world out. And he doesn't even call himself Batman in the movie. Like, it's not what we've seen before and doesn't have those same tropes. It's a legit movie. It's not just a Batman movie. And I want folks to remember that as they walk into this and just take it for what you get. I mean, the end scene, probably it didn't end how I thought it was going to end. And I'm not going to say anything about the ending. But it went in like 3 different directions that either close the door and you say goodbye, we get more because the studio has no idea what the hell they're doing. But all of them were okay, whichever direction they're going in, and I'm fine with it. And it's smart, man. It's a smart movie and it had so many layers, so many complexities to it. And Colin Farrell's fucking makeup, like holy shit, they need awards for this. I was actually at one point I was in a reclining seat, but at the edge of my seat, watching this thing, and I don't do that with movies. You know how pessimistic and how much I don't enjoy shit. I absolutely loved this movie.
Yeah, when you had posted on Facebook that it's like your third, I of course made a Batman Forever joke because that's where you go with that.
Yeah, the soundtrack didn't do it for me, but yeah, I don't know, man. It hit different than most other things that we've seen, and it could also be, we've talked about this whole being burnt out of Marvel stuff. This was a totally different take than any of that stuff's giving us, but this movie it's not afraid to pull punches. It's not afraid to explore things. And I think what Matt did with it was he had a vision. He saw it through. He didn't worry about the fandom. He didn't worry about the naysayers from the beginning. He found his Batman for the role. I think he played the role incredibly well. for those saying that he's not the right Batman, he was literally only out of his suit for 5 minutes in the entire movie. So get over it. And he was dressed as Batman the entire movie. So you can't say not your Batman. He actually didn't even have many speaking parts. I mean, it was great, man. I look forward when you see it and hearing about what you think about it.
Yeah, and I'm hoping to see it. I mean, it could be this Friday. We'll depend on how soon look and see what theaters are looking like, but it might be a couple weeks. So.
Yeah, we made an agreement. I went to a 4:30 show where like I think 10 people were there, so we checked the seating the whole time. That was the agreement of I said if it's even at 25% capacity, I'm not going. And it wasn't even close to that. So we ended up going.
Yeah. You said something funny about like you have to be dark for a Batman film, and you didn't mean tone, you meant just like the lighting. There's a great article, The Ringer, which I love The Ringer, and I love their comic book media coverage. I love a lot of their sports coverage too is great, which would make sense since it was founded by Bill Simmons, so it started just sports and pop culture. But they did Batman Week in honor of the movie, and they list like the top like Batman like film performances, and of course Heath Ledger was their number one. So let's move past that. But they did a great article, and it was like the history of designing Gotham City. And one of the things they mentioned, and I kind of forgot about this because obviously this could be predate my life, so you'd have to really go back to where it was a little bit cornier, but Gotham City didn't become dark until Frank Miller.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, like 3 years later, comes the Tim Burton Batman films. And so everyone who talks about, I think Pattinson like being, too emo or too brooding. First, I hate the term emo. I hate it. Like most emo we talk about is pop punk. And various like emo's just become this emotional genre. But remember, it started off as like a hardcore music thing where guys were in wedding dresses and pissing themselves on stage. So the emo we know and some people love today, and there are some emo bands I love that, but it's mostly just pop punk. That's what it is. And so to say someone like too emo, but I'm like, yeah, no, Adam West is the truest Batman performance because until the mid to late 80s, Batman was a campy character.
It was really until they did the whole breaking of the back thing that it was totally changed.
Yeah, I think, and this is true of all comics across the board, they are very campy until you get to the modern age. So you were talking mid to late 80s when comic books quit being, yes, Gwen Stacy died long before that, but Spider-Man was an asshole. He was an arrogant asshole on top of being a nerd. Like these things were campy. Like read these books, they were campy. So you can't say, he's not the history of Batman is super campy. So none of these guys were Keaton was probably, honestly, Clooney was, for modern Batman, was the campiest, but like Keaton was able to do that camp as well as a little bit dark. And there's a generational divide too. Like people who say Bale, I feel like didn't grow up with Batman the way we grew up with Batman.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
And whether it's because they didn't watch it until they're younger or older, or because they just didn't watch, or maybe Christian Bale was the first Batman they saw. I just think there's a camp with the age divide here, and there's going to be kids that are 8 or 9 who are going to grow up with Pattinson as their Batman, and they're not wrong.
Right.
I mean, you're only really wrong if Kilmer's your Batman. But so, yeah, I'm excited to see it. I'm excited you are excited about it. I was wondering, could the time period in which you saw it have helped? Because I know when we got to Loki, which was our 3rd Marvel series in quick succession, and we got Black Widow right in there too, you were burnt out, specifically like the train episode of Loki. I'd suggested, like, are we starting to feel more Marvel fatigue than we thought? Are we starting to feel more superhero fatigue? But everything's been spaced out more since then. Like, yes, we did just come off Peacemaker, but Peacemaker was completely different. And even then, Hawkeye right before it was completely different too. So do you think getting a little bit less in such a quick session helped you go into it with a wider eye and a more appreciation?
No, you know what I think helped is Hawkeye was a much different series than we had. It didn't take itself too seriously. It was a lot lighter, and Peacemaker was just such a good damn show. And again, didn't take itself too serious. And so that alone was nice to just have two series. I mean, I don't watch much not comic book related, outside of my comedies and then my Chicago shows with my grandma. So having these shows that were much lighter in comparison to the stuff that we had. I mean, we watched, was it 3 heavy series in a row where it's just like, all right, good stuff, but I need to be entertained. And so this, the Batman was a way of, yeah, it's serious and things like that, but it was done in an artistic way and it wasn't done to be serious, I guess. It's I think I was finally ready to consume it. So yeah, timing did have a lot to do with it. I think I was finally ready to consume a more serious piece again after those 2 shows that I love so much. Which, speaking of Hawkeye, I went back and rewatched it all on a binge. Half watched. I was doing papers and grades and so this stuff like that, and still holds up. So still love it just as much. But yeah, man, I was fried after Loki, and this Batman movie was like nothing I'd seen out of any of the Batman movies or DC at this point. So you're hearing it from me first here. DC got my eye on you. I actually am looking forward to some upcoming projects.
All right. Now, I know you've been grading papers all week. So what did you get a chance to watch that you want to tell the folks about?
What did I have? I actually did have something. Oh yeah, Grand Crew. I don't know if you've checked that out at all.
No, I know nothing about Grand Crew, so I'm excited to hear about it.
It's a fun show. It's one of the newer, I think it's a freshman show this year. I believe it's on NBC. It's about a group of friends, guys going through relationship struggles, and they got the one friend who's a woman in there too, kind of mix it up and lay their thing down. I think 6 episodes in, but it's just some guys, it's a show that actually finally doesn't focus on all white characters. So it's got predominantly an all black cast, which is cool.
But they hang out at a bar.
They do hang out at a bar.
Okay, so I have heard about this. It was kind of on my list to check out, and I just hadn't gotten to it yet. I guess I didn't realize it started.
Yeah, I actually didn't know about it until Eric, who I just saw Batman with, said, hey,
Yeah.
I've seen this. And so I watched it. And what I enjoy the most is they don't focus on the stereotypes. That's actually, everything is very non-stereotypical. Like they played Michael Bolton and shit in the show. So it's like the music that they have doesn't match what you would expect.
Nicole Byers, the one female like main
Yes.
character, right? Yeah, and she's fantastic. I think that's why it was on my.
I didn't know what to expect, and it's exceeded all expectations I think I even could have had. It's a little generic, but again, that's not bad for me. I'm all into that. So that's been a really good one. I think I mentioned Naomi on our last episode. That comes back this week. And folks, you still have time to catch up on Abbott Elementary. It's off for another 2 weeks, and it is my favorite new show of the last year.
It got me with a gut punch to end this little break too.
It's the smartest, saddest, most realistic sitcom on TV right now.
And this is another one that's getting, because of the filming styles, getting comparisons to The Office, but like it's just so good.
Yeah,
I think The Office comparisons do it an injustice. Like it's that good.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I mean, Quinta Brunson's amazing. She's so great, but Janelle James, her delivery is so incredible. And we actually just watched her stand-up recently, which I didn't know existed. And oh my God, she's great. The entire cast is excellent. And as somebody who grew up in a school similar to that from my earlier years, now I know why my teachers were stressed the fuck out. So it's just, man, it's hard because you laugh, but then you're like, it's not even funny because that's really how it is. But it's just such a well-written, great show with a great cast.
Well, if I remember correctly, because Shea Serrato is a huge proponent of this show, so he wanted to Bill Simmons talk about this, and he was talking about Janelle like specifically because she's young, but her grandmother, I believe it was, worked in like essentially this school, so it's very much based on the stories of her grandmother's stuff. So like, even though she doesn't have that experience, she's drawing from secondhand experience of this, and it just shows like that she actually is passionate about this idea too. So it comes through. It feels like the entire cast is just like they want this show made properly. So,
well, I also love, they have a couple white cast members. They have the the woman from the city who's great in her stuff, and then they have I guess in many ways the guy who'd play like the token woke guy or whatever you want to call it, but he's got such heart and love for the the students that he works with and everything. And it shows a very different light of the awkward white guy who doesn't quite fit in. It's the caring, loving white guy who doesn't care if he fits in. He just wants to share what he's got with everybody. And that's it's a minor detail, but it's such a big thing as far as these shows go, because in many ways it diversifies the cast beyond just having simple shades on the screen, basically.
Yeah, I feel like every character is so multi-dimensioned in this,
Yep.
with the exception of the principal character, because you need a buffoon. Because it's supposed to be a comedy, so you need that buffoon like to give an antagonist, I guess, because it's not really quite a villain, except for the fact that like the villainy here is she got her job for nefarious reasons, when really the sub character should be that person, like the person who cares. And so like it's just her buffoonery is the villain.
Well, I mean, living in a city where our mayors go to jail and everybody's drummed up on corruption charges and our school boards get eviscerated, she's the perfect example of what happens in an inner city school district and in an inner city school, especially when it comes to how the money's spent. And so that's why it's, yes, what we're seeing on screen is funny, but holy shit, this is a reality in so many communities across the country.
Yeah, it is so good. And I think Shea Serrano, who I think is such a brilliant person himself, like before he became a writer, was a teacher himself. So he worked in San Antonio in one of the school districts. So like he comes from a person like similar to yourself who worked in education and sees this from his point of view. And his endorsement, I mean, granted, he loves great comedies, so he's written, of course, books on great comedies. So I would trust Shay's opinion on anything like that. Like Shay, if you want to listen to someone talk about bad action movies or great sitcoms, like Shay's the person to trust on that one. So that's what tuned me in. And then you were talking about it too. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna trust these two on these. But yeah, that's great. I've been talking about it for a while, but you know, my brother and I, we love disc golf, and I love the disc golf coverage. And they had their first event, not this past weekend, but the weekend before was the first of the season. And the coverage was great. It's always post-production, so you get it a day after the tournament. But folks, if you just like casual sports you can watch and like pick in and out of, disc golf is it. And these athletes, like, they don't make much money doing disc golf. They're starting to get more money with sponsorships than they have in years prior. But if you just want the heart of watching and loving a sport, most of the commentators on the post-production are current athletes. Like, they're currently playing in these tournaments. So, and you're not going to see them on the leaderboard most times. They're just there because they love watching these other people compete. It's great. Jomez Pro over on YouTube does the men's field for the most of these tournaments. And then it's GK Media that does the women's. And the women's commentary is done by this team of they call themselves the Two Hot Geese. And they're both like upper middle of the field, but you hear them every time. They support every one of these women that they're competing against and love how much the sport is growing. So it's just great to hear these folks and that love, which isn't to say like watching the Bulls play the Bucks the other night and the end of that game was great too. So I'm still like fully in on the NBA.
Yeah.
But for like just sometimes these little sports with the great passionate fan bases are just exactly who you kind of need to break for. And I think I'd been out on sports for a while, but watching disc golf with my brothers just got me back, not into just disc golf, but I'm more into sports now than I was in the last few years. So it's great to see. But mostly, other than that, I watched the first 3 episodes of King of the Hill over again because we got the reboot coming.
Yep. Futurama's coming too.
Yeah, and that's the other one. I'm like 7 episodes into a rewatch of Futurama. Futurama, of course, I've seen the entire series several times at this point. I don't think I've seen every episode of King of the Hill though, because it started when I was younger, and I just took it as a show about rednecks, and I didn't think it was funny, and I didn't realize how smart it actually was.
Oh yeah.
But brilliant comedy and satire from Greg Daniels, which really shouldn't be surprising, but it took me until I was older to know who Greg Daniels was and to understand that at all. Like, yes, I know South Park was a social commentary from the beginning, but it was also kids saying funny, dirty words and making poop jokes. So that was easier for 10-year-old Gregory to get into than a bunch of guys from Texas saying yep and drinking beer. So
which is also basically the description of what I do in the summer in my town.
yeah, but when you're a kid, you don't understand that. You see this stereotype and it's harder to like understand that the stereotype is supposed to like break something down for you and not just be a stereotype. Unfortunately, there are plenty of actual redneck stereotype. It's just a redneck stereotype because the person isn't creative enough to do more with it. But yeah, so I'm rewatching those in anticipation for their returns. But other than that, like it's been comedies. I rewatched Old School just last night because I got home from work, and as I've said, I've been battling a migraine for over a week, so I needed something I could kind of ignore. And there's just something about a Wilson brother that's not offensive to me, and if the cast around him is enjoyable enough, I'm like, yes. I don't like Old School as much as I did when it came out, but that I've matured, and Old School obviously hasn't because it's been the same movie since then. So, but it was an enjoyable watch. But the one thing I did watch that I liked this week, and I know you liked, and this is kind of a perfect topic for us here, is Free Guy, which I watched Thursday night. And I loved it. You'd watch it. I know it wasn't this week, which isn't quite the premise of what we're watching this week. It was a week before for you, but let's talk about Free Guy, Dan.
So when I saw the preview, I was like, ugh, not like, oh, I would hate that, but like, it's not high on my list at all. And then I had heard from some folks who like saw it in the theater and stuff, because I have friends who had been much braver than I and gone out to the theater and stuff much sooner than I had, outside of my bougie private shows. And everybody's saying watch Free Guy, and I do love Ryan Reynolds, I really do. And so it hit Disney Plus, and I was like right after I was talking about it, and had been talking about it with friends and things like that. And I was like, all right, it hit Disney Plus, and so then I'm like, I imagine that we could watch as a family and things like that. And so Zoe, Lauren, and I sat down. I think it was a Friday night, and we loved it. It was. Ryan Reynolds wasn't just Ryan Reynolds in this movie. I mean, as he is in more roles, the heart that he puts into his features is just so great. It used to be his smile, his pecs, his abs, and quick wit, and there's a lot more heart in a lot of his stuff now. And Taika was in it. I love Taika Waititi, and it was the comedy was smart in this movie. It wasn't nearly as, I don't want to say dumb. I didn't think the movie seemed dumb. It just seemed like a run-of-the-mill kind of thing, but it was actually very smart. I will say, in watching it, it almost seemed like a parallel to the Lego movie for me in many ways, even some scenes. And I love the Lego movie, so that's not a knock at all. It was just one of those things where we were watching it. I said, Zoe, what movie does this remind you of? And she goes, the one that Peter Quill is in. And that's like, oh, the Lego movie? She goes, yeah, that kind of. And I was like, yes, me too. And so that was kind of a cool moment. But I know it just became available on Disney Plus a couple weeks ago, so I don't want to say too much about it, but it's actually a really smart film. And it's a great social commentary in so many ways, to be honest, about, I guess, leading with your heart. And the dumb version of our Free Guy kind of stole the show for me. Again, don't want to spoil much, but towards the last 40 minutes of it, maybe 30, there's a character that I hope you fall in love with, because we definitely did, and his development is great. And also the whole creative property notion of this movie, of who owns intellectual property and things like that, it's huge in a time like now where everything's going digital. So great social commentary, very smart, great performances by everybody. I actually didn't have any critiques on the movie on it. I was like, oh, that was fun. I think I'm going to watch this again in a few weeks.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was super into the idea of the movie when I first saw the first preview, and I think I saw something with like Techie and Ryan like riffing on it, and I was like, oh yeah, no, I want to see this. But then I was kind of like, I'd heard the movie critic Sean Fennessy had watched it, and he was not a fan, and he complained about the IP. And as I'm watching it, I'm like, there's not a lot of IP in this. And of course, not to spoil too much, but there's a battle scene at the end where some IP comes into it. But I'm like, that was more a kind of fun than anything else. Like this is literally what video game like coders and hackers do is they create weird IP to add into that video game that's not from that video game. I mean, you can play Macho Man Randy Savage, and I think with multiple different video games where Macho Man Randy Savage does not fit the video game. That's something the internet does. So I felt that was even fit into the whole general idea of it. Now, granted, of course, it was all Disney IP, so
Yeah.
if that makes sense. But like that's a licensing thing more than anything. I'm like, I don't remember anyone complaining about the IP that's involved in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. In fact, they were begging for a sequel for Who Framed Roger Rabbit that we're never going to get, unfortunately. And if we do, I won't watch it because without Bob Hoskett, it's not the same.
It also is not one of those movies that can adjust to our times.
Yeah, oddly enough, and I thought this was fitting that I saw it because knowing we were going to talk about this today, because we don't plan too much out. Just like, hey, I watched Free Guy the other night. I know you liked it. Let's talk about that. Is the little planning we do. So my good buddy Jason, friend of the show, Jason of this Dumb Marks podcast, he was apparently watching it with his mother, and he said, "How to explain Free Guy to my mother?" And then his one of his co-hosts, Steve, had said, "Tell her it's like the Truman Show," and I was like, "That's not actually the worst idea.
It's not.
It's kind of very much the Truman Show for the Twitch generation, kind of." And it really, there's a lot of commentary in this. The whole idea of free will is evident throughout this, and just kind of brilliant. Also a little scary. The idea of an evolving AI that's not just artificial intelligence but alive scares the shit out of me.
Yes.
But it's coming, I know, eventually. And good thing I live in the mountains because I can just go further up in the mountains, I guess, and hide.
You know who Lil Rel, his performance was so great. You know, I could see an MTV Movie Award coming for him, but I've been watching his career for a while, and just he stole the show for me for most of this movie, every scene he was in.
I've become a fan of his in the last like year or so, seeing some things he's in. I mentioned like I thought he was great in Vacation Friends, so like he's hilarious, but there's so much more to him and his performances too. And I thought, as campy as a lot of this movie was, I thought he got a lot of chance to stretch as an actor here, where we haven't seen it yet. And I'm like, oh, and none of it felt forced, because like Vacation Friends was great, but some of it really felt forced in his performances.
Yeah.
Only because a movie that's supposed to be that outlandish, the serious like dramatic turn in it is kind of ridiculous and forced. But in this one, since he starts out, he's a straight man throughout all of this, like, and it was not the role I didn't think I'd ever picture him in, but it was a role he kind of excelled in this film. So,
well, you know,
really great.
When Ryan Reynolds locks in on like his co-star or his, you know, whoever his anchor is going to be for this, he locks in, and their chemistry was just spot on for that. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see them in other projects in the future, just solely based on the chemistry the two of them had, which is a testament to Ryan Reynolds that he's able to bring out the best in everybody. But Lil Rel just brought it on his own too. And man, if you're not laughing, crying, wondering why you're feeling the emotions you're feeling by the end of it, then see your doctor and find out why, because this was actually a really surprisingly good movie.
Yeah, and like back to Lil Rel for just a moment, because I think the comparison's apt, but I think he's a better Kevin Hart, because Kevin Hart's kind of similar, where he has this chemistry with every co-star.
Yeah,
but Lil Rel's a better actor.
Oh, without a doubt, Kevin Hart just gets by on being Kevin Hart.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like Lil Rel became this character for me, and even though I knew it was Lil Rel, I kind of forgot it was Lil Rel until the end of the movie. I'm like, oh yeah, no, he has this quality about him where he seems to get along with any co-star just naturally. It doesn't seem like they have to act to get this chemistry. And we see Kevin Hart, like he's become friends with Dwayne Johnson. He's friends with Shaq. He's friends with The Rock. He's like Ice Cube, like everyone. Like, I know I said Dwayne Johnson and The Rock, but in my mind, they are two different people. Uh,
I think that's how you have to see him.
and that's all fine and good, but he's always playing Kevin Hart.
Yeah. Oh, without doubt.
He's almost like
Uh,
the cheaper version of Will Ferrell, because like Will Ferrell has this great chemistry and can act, but oftentimes he's just playing Will Ferrell, and I think that's who Kevin Hart is just playing some shade of Kevin Hart, just like Will Ferrell's always some shade of Will Ferrell.
well, I'm happy to get Lil Rel back too. I mean, not that he's been gone, but I love the Carmichael show. I know that was kind of a slept on show. A lot of people didn't watch. I absolutely loved what it explored and loved what it was. But then he was also on Insecure, which Issa Rae is my top-notch person when it comes to a lot of shows and TV. And he was great on there too. So he was on two shows that I really enjoyed. And to see him in a movie role where he can spread his wings and not just go by the script, I know he's in like Get Out and all that stuff, but this was the first time I felt like he really just was given the creative freedom to do him. And I'm hoping it opens a lot of doors. And I had a thought, he's kind of like that comedic relief, that we get in the like Ant-Man and Wasp, things like that type thing, where I could see him in a Marvel movie. As the stuff like Michael Pena gives us kind of thing. I could see Lil Rel in a role like that as well moving forward. So not speculating because nothing's been announced, but I would like to see that. So if Kevin Feige, you're listening, which I know you're not, it'd be a great casting opportunity.
Speaking of you, we could see it in a Marvel movie. This is a dangerous question, being that you're a happily married man. But how much did you crush on Jodie Comer's Millie during this movie?
Yeah, pretty hard.
Yeah, and of course, like British actress, and most of her work has been in British television. So, like it was, I think she did The Last Duel recently, so she's had a good year. She's been in Killing Eve. She was Rey's mother in the last Star Wars movie, but like I think this was the first one where we got to see a lot of her, and very much like, yeah, I very much from this performance where she was playing both an animated version of herself and a nerdy computer coder version of herself. Like I could see her being a Marvel hero too. Like
after this role, I can see her taking off like crazy. I mean, it's the range that she showed in this role, and no, it was a hell of a performance, and I could see her in many roles. Honestly, I mean, shit, do a Street Fighter reboot and make her cameo. I'm all for it.
Yeah, and I was thinking, like, as we get mutants into the MCU, pick any one of the mutants. Like, she could be a Boom Boom.
Yeah,
like I very much believe that she could play that with that edge and the anger that Boom Boom has. So there's
really like
right for whatever she wants in the future.
I appreciate her facial expressions in a lot of her delivery too. Especially in this film, it really went a long way in different situations that she was in where she's committed. And sadly, that's one thing I mention a lot these days because we don't see that a lot in movies. Movies are just turned out of just here, let's do this, let's move on. And she owned it. Great job.
Yeah, and they did. They focused on her face a few times and just let her face tell the story. And
yep.
That's one of those many things, which made me think she'd be perfect for like an A24 film.
Hey, I'll take it.
And of course, like you can do both, as we're seeing from Florence Pugh and her turn as an action star, and she's like that A24. It's almost like the A24. I feel like it's the evolution of mumblecore.
Mm-hmm.
As like the mumblecore directors became more sophisticated and grew, they became these. It's hard to call it A24 indie darlings since it's Brad Pitt's movie studio, but like it is what we used to traditionally think of as an indie darling. These are the films that played only in theaters in the big cities, and they were only playing for a couple of weeks if you're lucky, and maybe you only got one showing at night.
Yeah,
but yeah, she's primed for whatever she could do. Maybe she's even like this new generation Scarlett Johansson, where she can do an action role and then just do a smaller picture with a great performance. So, which there are plenty of great actors out there doing that. Jennifer Lawrence is another one who can do both things. So I'm excited for her future. I just really glad I finally watched this movie.
I am too, actually. I put it off so long, but we watched it, and then Right when it ended, Zoe said, "Can we watch that again?"
Yeah, it's brilliant, and it's also Disney Plus, as Dan mentioned. It's on HBO Max as well, folks. So you can watch it on either one right now, and you should. And then you should reach out to us. Let us know what you thought. Don't tell us we were wrong though, because we won't believe you. But you can tell us how good the movie was, how much you enjoyed it. Though we'll appreciate that. It had me excited. I quit Stranger Things halfway through season 2, but I know Steve Levy has another movie coming out potentially this year. I think it's even this spring. So I'm excited to see where else he's going to go. But there's a lot of producers. Like Berlanti was one of the producers on this, so he worked with a lot of people. I know you're not as big a Berlanti guy as I am, but I love the Arrowverse. So
Yeah. I mean, even the cameos in this movie was insane. It's just Ryan Reynolds basically called in every favor he had and just got them all there.
And like some of them are just guy in mask, like
Mhm.
so you're never gonna see it. It was reminding of George Clooney playing the dog in South Park.
Yes.
Like a silly cameo to do just for fun because you want to be part of a project. So
Right, exactly.
yeah, really, really great. Anything else you caught that you wanted to briefly talk about?
No, I mean, check out Reacher on Amazon. It's not going to blow your mind, but it was a fun watch. I was homesick in the last snowstorm. I had to shovel like 4 times during it, and I just watched all of Reacher. It was a good show. And The Mayor of Kingstown, check that out as well on Paramount Plus. I don't want to dive too deep into it because it's one of those shows that it's hard to talk about without giving anything away, but definitely recommend checking those 2 shows out. Reacher more so is just a fun watch. Mayor of Kingstown because it's my new shield. I guess I'll say that.
That's a high praise.
Yeah. Jeremy Renner.
My only last little bit before we got out here is I finally watched The Princess and the Frog, which I'd never seen before. It was one of those,
my favorite Disney movie.
I was excited for it when it was announced, but I just never saw it, childless man, and I wasn't going to the movies much at that time. So, but one of my nieces the other day was wearing Tiana pajamas,
Yes.
and so I didn't even ask them what they wanted to watch. I'm like, I want to watch this, and I put that on, and they were both into the music, but man, it is great. I had no doubt that it would be great, but at the same time, like actually watching it and seeing it, and I was like, oh yeah, no, this is what 2D animation can be. And really glad I finally saw it. I was like, Keith David's performance was just brilliant, and I'm like, good on you. And I know I've seen like speculations for live action. The only person to play the same role would be John Goodman, and I guess that makes sense. But I'm like, I would not want to hear anyone else sing that Keith David role. So that's tough.
It's funny because I've often asked, and it comes up, what is your favorite Disney film? And I always say The Princess and the Frog, and I get the look of, and somehow people miss this Disney film. And so it's the most creative to me. It's the most fun, and the soundtrack's a banger. And I just love it. It represents so much. And to be quite honest, I think that was the first movie that Zoe and I sat through when she was of an age to sit through a movie other than like, crying, grabbing stuff, eating, falling asleep. So the first movie we actually sat through together was Princess and the Frog too.
Awesome. For me, especially we're going to talk animated, it's always going to be Robin Hood. Robin Hood just hits me in a way some of the others don't, and had a couple great tracks, including one banger in a time before Disney was doing like the animated just as musicals. So good on Robin Hood. And then it's a goofy movie because it's just so fun. So let us look. First, watch Free Guy. Let us know how awesome it was, and tell us your favorite animated Disney film, folks.
Yeah.
And if it's not an animated film, it's got to be Bedknobs and Broomsticks. So,
yes.
All right, Dan. Thank you so much. This has been a blast. I'm glad to do this again, and I'm glad to be able to just talk whatever we're watching on TV that we're loving. Because there's going to be things we're probably going to turn off and not want to finish watching, and I'm glad we're not talking about them anymore.
I'm with you.
All right. I'll see you next week, Dan.
All right, my friend.